What is the most incredible human feat of all time? Coming back from the moon. In 1903, the New York Times said that it would take between 1 and 10 million years for man to develop the technology for flight. 9 weeks later, the Wright brothers had their first flight. 66 years later, a man walked on the moon. Absolutely wild. I remember when I was at school and we were studying the Industrial Revolution. My teacher said that although we were studying set dates, the Industrial Revolution never really stopped. If anything, the rate of advancement sped up. I guess it changed into the technological revolution, and now it's the digital revolution. I think the history of flight shows that rate of advancement so well. He also said that if you took someone from the year 0 to the year 1000, they'd be pretty impressed with what they saw. If you took someone from 1000 to the year 2000, they wouldn't be able to comprehend what they were seeing. The rate of human advancement is crazy, but that advancement of flight, 66 years to put someone on the moon, is still the greatest achievement. Absolutely. If you went back to me in 1998 with my Nokia phone and showed me an iPhone 15, it would blow my mind completely. It hurts me as a millennial that 1990 looks so dated now. 1990, no internet, only a few people with mobile phones that were big enough. There's probably people with slipped disc injuries now from the days of carrying them. 2000, internet taking over, everyone has mobile phones. 2010, social media, the modern mobile phones with internet, online all the time. That's 20 years. 0 to 1000, according to my history teacher, they developed making hay. The Romans never had that, and it helped keep animals alive over winter. Hay. In 1,000 years, they got hay. In 60 years, we went from some people flapping about in a field to the moon. In 10 years, we went from playing Snake and Monochrome to all of human knowledge in our pockets. This is the only answer. It is the pinnacle of human achievement. The entire 20th century. We created so much things within that time period when everything else took hundreds, if not thousands of years to achieve. We created automatic weapons, airplanes, the modern automobile, the radio, rocketry, television, a lot of the antibiotics we know today, nuclear energy, computers, space travel, the internet, all within 100 years of each other. That's impressive as hell, and a huge technological advancement in such a short period of time, on the grand scale of things. Most of that groundwork, though, came before the 20th century. Hot air balloons, telegrams, velocity of artillery, quarantine, coal power, and electricity, that was all being started in the 19th century, if not earlier. Sometimes centuries earlier. Update. True. I guess what I mean is that the 20th century is when everything started falling into place for us. Thousands of years of technology that led up to a single moment in time where we finally had what we needed to start popping out invention after invention, one after the other, in a way history has never seen before. It's still magnificent to think about. Creating languages, lots of them. The most universal and adaptive tools that ever existed, and they defined us. I had to scroll down so far to find this answer. We definitely take this for granted. If humans born 10,000 years ago were born today, they would grow up no differently than modern people, be they geniuses or average Joes. Nearly every other achievement of mankind stems from the ability to share knowledge. Did humans do that? Or was that pre-humans? I'd imagine languages existed before we did. I think Homo erectus specimens are considered our direct ancestors, and they must have had smaller pre-agricultural nomadic societies. And they're literally human, so it's not like languages didn't exist before our species. Hell, maybe elephants or whales have languages that we don't understand as language, etc. Our brains didn't take off developing until we started agriculture and cooking food. Vastly increased calories, a requirement for running calorie-hungry larger brains. I would guess language pre-humans was a very rudimentary thing. When our brains started jumping in size and complexity, our language probably followed suit. Mobile phones. It's absolutely incredible that almost every person on the planet can instantly contact anyone else, anywhere, and access virtually all recorded knowledge and information on a device the size of your hand. It's crazy. We are actually like 65% of the world population with access to phones. But yeah, I agree. We do stuff on a palm-sized device now that we couldn't do on a desktop only 20 years ago. Imagine bringing a functional phone to a place like ancient Egypt. They'd stone you to death for impersonating a god or something. The modern phone has 100,000 times the processing power of the computers used in the moon landing mission. The volume of information one can access, learn, and absorb, let alone the number of people that one person can communicate with at an instant, is totally inconceivable only 30 years ago. People left Earth with less computing power than now, which is varied by every mobile phone user, and return safely in a world first for humanity. The mobile phone and Wi-Fi has had the greatest impact and influence on the world ever. Modern medicine. 200 years ago, we still treated ailments with bloodletting and leeches. It is why homeopathy was thought to work, because the cure at the time was worse than the disease. We still use leeches. Sure, for their anticoagulant and pressure-relieving properties. Not because we think someone has ill-balanced humors causing issues. Germ theory, that illnesses were caused by viruses and bacteria, wasn't readily accepted until around 140 years ago. Prior to that, it was bad air, as part of miasma theory, that was thought to cause diseases, although one benefit of miasma theory is that it encouraged good ventilation, which proves to have other benefits. Vaccines are modern marvels for sure. I'm very intrigued by what stem cell breakthroughs will produce. Vaccines have microchips in them. The American far right. I was thinking anesthesia. We figured out how to keep a person alive, asleep, and out of pain so well we can cut open their body and remove entire organs if necessary. Sometimes even swapping them out, and then wake them back up again when it's all over. We take it for granted now, but that is a staggering achievement. A friend of mine who's a doctor would disagree and would say a far greater achievement is the wide availability of clean water and good sanitation. These have prevented far more disease than the medical profession and pharmaceutical industry put together could ever hope to do. Creating instant worldwide communication. Just over 100 years ago, it would take 3 months to send a hi from Australia to your brother in Canada, right? As a kid in the 80s, having to send letters back and forth with friends when I moved was amazing. It would take days, weeks from across 5 states. Long-distance phone calls were astronomical in cost. Now we can just text and connect on social media. That's awesome. I'm 47, and I just recently started sending letters again. A friend of mine had sent me a birthday card with a handwritten letter, and then nostalgia just hit so hard. So I wrote her back. I wrote another friend and set a reminder on my phone to occasionally send out handwritten notes. I still send letters. Nice paper, dip pen, I even seal. Does take a while, but my friends love them. Curious, how do you find pen pals back in those days? Do you just write a random address and hoping that person replied to your letter? Our school did a ballon release with, I think, our school's address on tags, then had a map, and they would pin when they got a response. So that's one way to find a pen pal. Our school did that too. Mine reached the farthest and landed in a farmer's field. He wrote back to the school and the teacher read it in class. When I was a kid, back in the last century, if you had a magazine subscription to some kid magazine, they often had columns where kids who wanted pen pals would ask people to write. Someone I know wrote to his for years, and eventually they met up in Canada on a family vacation. The fact Musashi won 60-plus duels, many of which were to the death, could not image surviving so many fights with bladed weapons. Iral plot armor. The only other people who could survive that many fights are fictional characters. You underestimate the potential of training. There's a reason MMA fighters beat the dog piss out of amateurs in a sparring match. Now imagine being gifted with swordsmanship, very intelligent, and training relentlessly under guidance of a relatively good trainer and the mentally stability of a Buddhist. And in battle to the death, he's obviously not holding back and abusing the skill difference, plus adrenaline enhancing his reaction time and analytical ability, furthering the gap between him and his opponents. There's countless examples of gifted hard workers that were in a league of their own, from athletes to actors. Why would dueling be different? Does adrenaline boost analytical ability? I kinda assume that shit went straight out the window. It boosts your intuitive knowledge, or the information that's processed unconsciously. Like when someone says heads up and it startles you, you move very quickly. But if you try to plan out move quickly at this time and then move it slower. And anecdotally, I believe the more experience you have practicing being calm under pressure, the better your intuition runs during adrenaline. Fear leads to maladaptive thinking. Adrenaline does not. There's a very thin line between these, but a good fighter knows how to utilize both. Makes sense. For me, fight or flight makes me rely on pure muscle memory, but my muscles don't have any memory. I think it's pretty amazing how the people that the movie Alive is based upon managed to survive 72 days in the Andes in freezing temperatures and with barely any food. I have nothing but the utmost respect and honor for these people, how brave and tough they had to be. There's no way I would survive that situation. Their journey out was insane. 0.38 miles and around a 5,000-foot elevation change, including climbing a 15,000-foot peak, all with zero climbing gear, in 9 days. Professional climbers have attempted what they did and have been unable to complete it. We were playing a game against an unknown and unforgiving opponent. The stakes were terrible. Play well or die, but we didn't even know the ground rules. Nando Parado. Not for nothing, but there was an abandoned summer resort a comparatively easy 13 miles east of them. Not sure there was any food there at the time, but it would have provided shelter and an exit route to civilization. Seemed to recall that one of the survivors glimpsed what he thought might be a road in that direction, but they didn't follow up. It was. Alex Honnold free-soloing El Capitan has to be up there. I'd say Marc-Andre Leclerc from The Alpinist is more impressive, and Alex would agree. That dude soloed some of the most ridiculous peaks in the world, and he did it like a child climbing a jungle gym. The thing about free soloing is that, to the viewer, it all appears to be left up to chance. In reality, it's all up to the climber's own skill and execution. I do quite a bit of mountaineering, and summit an average of one peak over 13,000 weekly year-round, and I've completed countless routes, without a rope, that would have made me crap my pants if I were to have tried them early in my climbing endeavors. As you gain skill, you'll gain confidence, and you really lose most or all of the anxiety and fear that seems inherent to that sort of thing. Granted, Alex is about 1000x better at climbing than I'll ever be, but I can still understand why he was completely calm and collected the entire time. He wouldn't have tried it without being 100% certain he could pull it off. He has a particular neurological condition for which his amygdala does not work normally, so he experiences fear in a different way than the rest of us. That probably brought him there. No, he doesn't. But his amygdala is just requiring a higher threshold to create an anxious response because he has been so exposed to stressful and life-threatening situations. So in most situations, it doesn't activate and he is more calm. I'd say it's more a feat of mental fortitude than athleticism. A lot of climbers could free solo that route, as in, they are physically capable. But the mentality to remain calm and collected for that long at Thay height is superhuman. Yeah? Hard disagree. It's both. Physically, most people can't dead hang on a pull-up bar for 2 minutes. The number of people in the world capable of climbing that route in general by aid climbing is small. Maybe a few thousand in the world. The number capable of free climbing, still with ropes, but using their own body to scale the wall rather than pulling on ropes or aiders, is maybe under a few hundred. Those capable of free soloing the route is under 20. And none would try because it's such an incredibly hard feat. It's essentially suicidal. Timothy Treadwell spent 13 summers in the Alaskan bush living amongst the grizzly bears. 12 of those summers he didn't get eaten. Legend, 13, unlucky for some. More like he managed to several bears and his girlfriend killed by being an idiot. I mean, I get the joke here, but Treadwell was in no way enviable. People seem to have that response. His girlfriend knew the dangers, and she chose to go out there with him. He was not responsible for her death. In regards to the bears, I agree. He didn't do any of the bears he claimed to love any favors by being up close and personal with them. However, he doesn't get enough credit for how many summers he survived unscathed, in my opinion, or the bears do. It's a testament to their tolerance that they put up with his my furry brother's nonsense as long as they did, until Treadwell met some bears who hadn't met him before and were hungry and doing bear things, for which they were soon killed. Hard to parse the girlfriend's exposure on this, but I'd at least argue that she might not have known the dangers so much as thought that Treadwell did know them, so she trusted him, foolishly. Yeah, antisocial weirdo who got careless around hungry bears. I'd add deeply irresponsible. And the nonsense he was doing was pointless YouTube-type thing before there was YouTube. Going from Niels Bohr's model of an atom to nuclear division in even less time is more incredible. Both cases of, here's a thing, followed by, how can we weaponize this? Nuclear weaponry is especially interesting because, at various times, they were worried the reaction wouldn't stop once it started and would destroy the planet. Another fear was they'd set the atmosphere on fire and burn the entire planet. That must have been a wild time. Some humans would do anything to see if it was possible to do it. If you put a large switch in some cave somewhere, with a sign on it saying, "End of the world switch. Please do not touch," the paint wouldn't even have time to dry. Terry Pratchett. That first test must have been a massive pucker factor moment. Even more impressive when you look at the time between the correct model and nuclear division. I was watching Oppenheimer and I was like, hold on. If he's Niels Bohr, then he and Oppenheimer were alive at the same time? What? Ernest Shackleton and the crew of Endurance surviving being stranded in Antarctica. Endurance became beset, trapped in the ice of the Weddell Sea, before it was able to reach Vassal Bay. It drifted northward, held in the pack ice, throughout the Antarctic winter of 1915. Eventually, the ice crushed the ship, and it sank, stranding its complement of 28 men on the ice. After months spent in makeshift camps as the ice continued its northwards drift, the party used lifeboats that had been salvaged from the ship to reach the inhospitable, uninhabited Elephant Island. Shackleton and 5 other members of the group then made an 800-mile, 1,300 kilometers, open boat journey in the James Caird and were able to reach South Georgia. From there, Shackleton was eventually able to arrange a rescue of the men who had remained on Elephant Island and to bring them home without loss of life. Such an incredible story. Highly recommend the book by Alfred Lansing. One of the all-time best. I highly agree. One of the best written and most inspiring books I've ever read. Also, when they reached South Georgia, they reached the other, uninhabited, side of South Georgia. So they then had to climb a mountain range, build sledges, and sledge down to where the whaling station was. They not only traversed a mountain range, they traversed a range that had never been done before. Also, 2 of the boats sent as rescue caught fire and had to turn around because noon responsed. Seeing how climate change is being denied, CFC ban was really a miracle. Change is easy when it can be done without taking a major income stream away from the rich people that own everything. You seriously think taking cars, trucks, and electricity away from the general public will only harm the rich people that own everything? Come on, nobody is that dumb. And then you remember that the oil companies have known for over 50 years. And the fact that the electric car was mothballed in the 90s. And then you ask why there was no rail development in the second half of 20th century, and then finally realize, yep, the balance of power needs to change. To add to all your 4 points, learning that crops and soil need to be rotated, the corn every 4 years to not drain the nitrogen out of the ground, and figuring out how many yields to get a year on hundreds of acres. Launching a spaceship landing on Mars, what's particularly interesting is that astronauts schedule 2 hours a day for muscle strengthening because of the anti-gravity atrophy descending into Marianas Trench. I've been 70 meters underwater, and it can feel like your lungs will pop. Try thousands of meters more. The creation of electricity as a basic need, how the heck was that discovered? I know, Franklin, looking at the Olympics. There are people who can run over 27 miles an hour, long jump 29 feet. That's bananas. Looking at the 7 created wonders of the world. The pyramids of Egypt. They are within 0.05 degrees of alignment with each other. How was Easter Island created with those large boulders and no machinery, while not a wonder of the world? How were the catacombs in Paris created? Construction of Sagrada Familia in Spain, etc., etc. Planet Earth is incredible. A lot of people don't take care of this, but our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't think anything has ever united the world like COVID-19 did. And everyone played their part in stemming the spread and saving millions of lives. We all locked down, sacrificed seeing friends and family, whilst scientists worked on vaccines and got one rolled out in an amazing amount of time, which people then took, and now we can live normally again. Did we live through the same pandemic? Right? In my area, it was constant yapping about things being closed, people running around wearing chin diapers, refusal by half our population to even get a vaccine. The same people who violated social distancing and wore their masks down under their mouth and nose, and just mounds of selfish words everywhere. The pandemic made me realize how little my neighbors actually care about our community. Hint, they don't, at all. Don't forget the billions we spent building a world-leading track and trace system that was not for purpose and broke when they ran out of cells on the Excel spreadsheet, which they were using instead of an actual database for reasons unknown. Also, anecdotally, 2 people in my office tested positive, but still came in because the government guidelines said they could. The entire office came down with COVID except like 3 of us. Everyone reported the test results to Track and Trace. Track and Trace never bothered to let contact any of us. It also revealed the foil nutheads among your friends, which is a plus. It's interesting, isn't it, that there are so many different ways for humans to achieve things. As part of a group endeavor, as part of a small team, as complete individuals, and more generally, are we talking about things we do, or things we think of, or things we make, or the art we can create? Marian Rejewski cracked the Enigma code. Turing and Flowers broke it wide open and changed the world doing so. Tenzing and Hillary did the unthinkable and climbed Everest. Armstrong and Aldrin walked on the moon, ably assisted by Collins and about 400,000 others. But ask yourself, would anyone else have been able to do these things had they been swapped in instead? As in, would the backup crew of Apollo 11 succeeded? Would different climbers have one day scaled the mountain? Would anyone else have written something like Romeo and Juliet? Or composed something like Ode to Joy? I think for me, I'll always come back to something perhaps nobody else could have ever done, and which I hope nobody else will ever have to do. Sir Ernest Shackleton leading a handful of men in a dinghy to summon help for his trapped crew. Over 100 years ago, over 800 miles in the Southern Ocean.